Hey everyone, it's Stephanie here, and today I have a video to share that features some fun dies from my favorite things, and just using white cardstock and Copic markers to color on them rather than cutting them out of colored cardstock. It's just a great way to kind of stretch your supplies and give them a little bit of depth and dimension, because when you color them with markers, you can kind of use shading and different colors of the markers to just kind of create a little bit of dimension to the flowers, just a little bit more than you can with just plain cardstock. So I've went ahead and cut everything out of Neenah Solar White cardstock. I cut out the mason jar from the mason jar die set, and I also cut out a bunch of flowers from the fresh cut flower set. You don't necessarily have to use these together, but they were designed so that the flowers would fit perfectly inside the mason jar. So what I'm doing here is I just have a little notepad of plain scratch paper that I just use for working on top of, and I just put some adhesive across this paper. I just use my dot roller so that when I want to remove these die cuts, they just come off super easy and there's no issue. And what I just kind of adhered them all across the paper. And the reason I did this is just so it's a little bit easier to color them as I'm going along here, just because they're so thin and delicate, they're super hard to color. So this just kind of helps to keep them in one spot as I'm going along with my markers. So now what I'm doing is just taking my lightest green color first and going ahead and completely covering all of these stems and leaves with this color. And then I'm going to go in with some darker shades, a medium green and then a darker green, and just kind of add some color to the stems and then also to the leaves, just to kind of give them a little bit of depth in the color of the leaves. And the great thing about these dies is they have little score lines in them. So by using the markers and coloring on them, you can kind of accentuate those score lines, and I really like that because it just kind of helps give that realistic feel even more than what you would get with the flat die cut. So I'm just kind of jumping through here and speeding through the coloring, and you can see here now when I pull this off, you can see the great shading that I get on those leaves, and it just makes it look so much better to me than just the flatness of just simple cardstock. So now that I have all the stems done, I'm just going to go ahead and repeat the same process with the flowers. So I just cut a bunch of different flower tops out and went ahead and did the same thing with the adhesive and ran it across the scratch paper. And now I'm just, once I adhered all the flowers on, I'm just slowly going through and coloring each set of flowers. I'm keeping the same color. So all of these tulip type flowers are all going to be aqua, and I'm not even sure if there's a such thing as an aqua tulip, but I really like aqua on flowers, and I just think it really adds to the full arrangement when you're putting a bunch of different flowers. So I tend to use this color often on my flower die cuts. So I'm doing the same thing as I did with the leaves. I just went ahead with the lightest color first, completely covered the flower, and then added my medium and darker shades just around the bottom area, and then just kind of blended everything together. So you can see there now I also did some pink flowers and some purple ones, and I'm finishing off here with some yellow ones. And for this one here, I just kind of switched my design and did the darker color on the outer flower on the first one, and then for the second two I decided to put the darker shade of yellow on the middle of the flower and then just let it kind of fade out into the lighter color on the outside. And now I have all of the flowers and stems ready to go, and I also colored all of the leaves. I don't think I put that on the video, but I did the same technique that I did with the stems. I just went ahead and completely colored all the leaves with the same green colors that I had used for the stems. So now you can see here I'm going to start to put my arrangement together. So I had kind of played around with the flowers before I started to glue everything down. So I took a quick picture with my phone, which you can see kind of there beside me, and I'm just using that as a visual guide to kind of not necessarily perfectly position everything the same as what you see in the phone picture, but just kind of, it just gave me an idea of how everything would fit nicely. So I'm kind of trying to stay in that kind of area where I have the flowers positioned, and then I know that this will completely fill up and I won't have any funny spaces once I get everything adhered on. So I'm just using a glue pen and gluing all of the stems on first. And this is just the vase that I had cut, or I'm sorry, the mason jar that I had cut out of the Neenah Solar White cardstock. And I'm just going ahead and adhering these stems directly on top. And I'm not worried too much that it looks not too realistic because they're sitting on top of the jar, because I'm going to eventually put a piece of vellum over top of it that I've cut out from the jar die as well. And that's going to make it look like the stems are actually in the jar versus sitting on top of them. So you can see here now that I've taken it off, I have all the stems adhered and they look great so far, and we just need to add a little bit of water inside that jar. So I'm taking another Copic marker. I think it's actually the same aqua color that I was using on the flowers pictured above. And I'm just going ahead and adding some aqua color all around the bottom of the vase to mimic what it would look like if there was water there. And I'm going a little bit darker at the top and then a little bit darker around the stems. And then I'm also taking the marker and going darker at the very bottom of the vase. And this is just going to provide some shading and some shadows to make it look like you can see the bottom of the mason jar there. And this is just another way to add more realism to the finished piece. So I'm going ahead and continuing to add some darker color there and then blending it out, because you don't want it to have sharp lines, you just want to kind of have it blend. And then to complete the jar, I'm using some very light gray colors and kind of accentuating the top rim area of the jar, and then also adding some around the edges just to kind of break up the stark whiteness and make it look more dimensional. And then I also am going to put a little bit of the gray color into the water for some shadows. And then take my colorless blender and kind of just go around on the inside area of the jar to even out all of that color. And then once I have that done, I went ahead and adhered the whole mason jar piece onto a die cut piece of paper that I had cut out of one of the Blueprints dies. And I'm just going ahead now and doing all of my flower tops. So I'm just kind of following that picture once again. I'm positioning the flowers kind of at the top areas of the stems. I'm tucking some in behind, I'm leaving some in the top, and I'm kind of positioning some flowers under other ones. And then I'm also adding some of these gray flower centers that I had colored, which I don't think I caught on the film when I was filming all the coloring, but I did color a bunch of the center areas of the flowers, and I'm going ahead and adhering all of those to the flower tops. And then as I go, I just kind of looked at it, kind of decided if I felt like it was where I wanted it to be, and decided that it needed a little bit more added to it. So I went ahead and added a couple more flowers, and then I'm also adding some of the leaves that I had colored that were not part of the stems. And I'm just kind of tucking those in under the flower tops and just kind of any areas that seemed like it needed a little bit of extra detail because it looked a little bit too white with opening. And then once I had all the flowers and everything's adhered, I went ahead and used a gray Copic marker to add some shadow and shading underneath of the jar, just so it kind of looks like it's sitting on something versus floating in air. And then once I did that and had that completed, I just wanted to add a little bit of dimension to the flowers and a little bit of detail. So I went ahead and added some clear Wink of Stella glitter to all of the flower tops. And then I'm also taking a white gel pen and just adding some detail to some of the flowers as well as the leaves. So I'm just adding some dots onto some of them. And then on the leaves, like I said, with these dies, you get a little bit of embossing onto the leaves and even on the flowers. So it really helps when you want to add some details. You can kind of just trace the embossing lines. So I just went ahead with my white gel pen and kind of traced over the middle areas of the leaves. And then I also finished it off by doing some white dots on the center areas of the flowers there that you can see have the little dots embossed in them. I went ahead and just added some gel pen to those as well. And then once everything was completed, I adhered the whole piece onto a piece of steel gray cardstock with some foam tape. And then I also added this little tag that comes in the Mason Jar DIe-namics set. And I stamped it with a stamp from the set and went ahead and adhered it to the jar top with some twine to make it look like it was tied on top. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll give some Copic coloring on white die cut pieces a try. It's just a great way to have a lot of detail and dimension. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.